let's talk about the important stuff because Theresa May, well, people are going to try and burn her house down, it seems, in the House of Commons. So she's got people coming at her from all sides on the issue of Brexit, particularly this customs union partnership plan. No one seems to like this plan. Remainers or leavers aside. What should she do as a prominent Remainer yourself?
Well, I'm afraid the logic, and indeed we're going to discuss this afternoon in the House of Lords, the question of the Irish border. I believe the logic of all of this drives anyone who considers it at all to the conclusion that the only way in which you can preserve this open border, if I put it that way, is by being part of the customs union or part of a customs union with the European Union. And if any of the other solutions which have been offered, including the one you've just described, don't seem to have any kind of support or indeed any credibility. And of course the other one, if you recall, is something about sort of technical, sort of electronic border. Well, of course, that was based on a report which was produced some weeks ago, but there's not much reference to it any longer. Why? Because the person who wrote the report, I think he was a Spanish expert, he said, yes, you can have an electronic border, but you have to have customs posts as well.
But this is the thing, the people who are rather closer to the Irish border issue than you or me, DUP, for instance, the likes of David Trimble, former Ulster Unionist leader, former First Minister of Northern Ireland, say, look, this is a complete load of nonsense. The idea that it'd be terrible to have any sort of border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and this would basically end the Good Friday peace agreement. It says they're not remotely linked and never have been. We know that only 2% of the trade from the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland goes across that border. Virtually all of the trade from the Republic of Ireland and the Northern Ireland go towards the British mainland, where we already have we'll have a border over the sea, but effectively things coming in by air or by ship already effectively face customs. Well, I do not understand why this should be a sticking point. It seems to me, as a leaver, that this is simply a big smokescreen to try and stop Brexit.
Well, if it is as easy to resolve as David Trimble and others suggest, then why haven't they offered a solution yet? It's been described as a little thing by a very prominent Conservative member of the House of Lords who speaks very strongly in favour of Brexit. But the fact is that no one has been able to provide the solution. And of course, remember, it's not just about goods, it's about the movement of people. And that, as we know, there are forgotten. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of movements of people across the border every day pretty well, and certainly probably millions over a year. And the question then is whether or not at that stage individuals would be asked to stop and produce some kind of identification or something of that nature. And I think it is a more profound issue. And I say this, I mean, I was born and brought up in the west of Scotland, where never violence, but sectarianism was a very substantial part of the way of life as I was growing up. Much less now, but still available in some small pockets. What one forgets is the degree of, as it were, concession which had to be made on both sides in Northern Ireland in order to get the Belfast Agreement. And it has enormous symbolism. And symbolism in politics is often important. But in the context of Northern Ireland, or Ireland as a whole, perhaps to put it more properly, the symbolism is enormously important.
But doesn't Northern Ireland need to choose? Northern Ireland, wants to be part of the United Kingdom. They are part of the United Kingdom, and that's if they are the United. And although the majority of people who voted in Northern Ireland voted to remain in the EU, we voted as a UK as a whole. Same as Scotland. Doesn't matter. We voted as a UK whole, and the result was they can choose to go and be part of the Republic of Ireland if they want, or they can choose to be part of the United Kingdom. Those are the choices available. The British people's will is that we leave. And if a customs border has to be put in, if any other sort of border, I mean, frankly, that is just part of the cost of a democracy.
Well, no one said when the bus was driving around the United Kingdom saying we're going to get 350 million a week we're going to spend on the National Health Service.
Didn't say we were going. You know, it didn't say we were going to. It said.
That was the figure that was on the
That was the figure. That was the figure, but it didn't say we're going to. It wasn't a promise. There wasn't a manifesto pledge. You know that as well as I do.
But it was being said at every stop by the blonde-haired bus conductor, who's now the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs. I mean, there's no doubt that these issues were not properly canvassed.
I can very clearly remember people talking about this issue of Northern Ireland, and the British people said, "Well, you know, sorry, but we have bigger issues about control of our country." No, let's leave.
I mean, when I'm arguing about a question of fact, I do not remember, and I followed the debate very, very considerably, as I've no doubt you did as well. I do not remember anyone raising this issue.
I absolutely do. John Major and Tony Blair went over to Northern Ireland, and they actually did. I can actually very clearly remember this. Mingus.
But wait a minute. This was after, not during the campaign. It was. When we were, well, I mean, in a way, the timing doesn't matter. I mean, if two former prime ministers who had between them, John Major started it and Tony Blair finished it, had the responsibility for creating the settlement, the Belfast Agreement, which has brought quite extraordinary benefits, both to the north and the south. Give us their expert opinion.
Yeah, they also gave us their expert opinion about giving away our democratic sovereignty to Brussels, and the British people have rejected that. Let's move on, though. I want to talk about what's...
No. As I understand this program, you ask the questions, and I try to do my best.
No, I know, but it's times against us. I want to move on to other issues than Northern Ireland.
If I can put it this way, I remain unconvinced.
Okay, right. Okay, but I think the British people don't, though. That's the key point. Can we talk about what your colleagues in the House of Lords have been up to in terms of defeats on the EU withdrawal bill, more defeats last night on different issues? Do you think there is a concern that this actually could end up leading to the abolition of the House of Lords? There's a lot of anger about this.
Well, what is the role of the House of Lords? The role of the House of Lords is to hold the government to account and to be a revising chamber, and where it thinks legislation is defective, to offer ways of improving it. Now, be quite clear, I was 28 years in the House of Commons. The House of Commons is the preeminent chamber. The House of Lords cannot stand in the way of the House of Commons. But it's perfectly rational for the House of Lords to say to the House of Commons, think again, and here are some of the things you ought to think about. If they're rejected, then of course the House of Lords will have to accept that. But we are now having the kind of detailed debate which we did not have during the campaign of the referendum, and we're also having the kind of detailed examination of the precise legislation which is being offered by the government. We're fulfilling our responsibility.
Well, you say, holding the government to account and being a revising chamber. I think revising doesn't mean actually undermining the result of a democratic referendum.
But we're not undermining. I mean, the suggestion is therefore, if that question were taken to its logical conclusion, when anything came from the Commons to the Lords by way of legislation, we should just rubber stamp it and send it back. That's not our responsibility. It's not what we were created for.
No, but there's a difference between improving legislation, like on the Dangerous Dogs Act or something like that, and when there is a government bill that comes through which is enacting the result of a democratic vote in a national referendum, the House of Lords needs. You don't get to hold the British people to account. You can hold the government. Right. The government is representing the British people in this scenario.
It's representing 52% of them, of course.
Last time I looked, 52% was bigger than 48%.
Well, I think we can agree about that. But no one speaks for the 48%. And what the House of Lords is doing, as it is required constitutionally to do, is offering to the House of Commons what we conceive to be improvements. The House of Commons doesn't like them, then it can reject them. And then the House of Lords will have to like it or lump it.
Okay.